Welcome to the Better Two podcast. I'm your host, Donna. Today's guest is author Leonard Goldberg, and he has a series of Sherlock Holmes's daughter. And he's here to talk about his latest book called A Scandalous Affair. But we talk about that and so much more, so tune in. Hi, Leonard. How are you doing today?
I'm fine, John. How about yourself?
I'm good. So you it's funny because before we started this, you're about to tell me about bad writing habits because you received a phone call because you're working on an article. So we're going to just dive right into that before we get into your books and everything because you are a writer and that's what we're going to talk about today. So what are the bad writing habits that you advise against?
Well, I don't advise against them. They're just ingrained in us. Um, and let me give an example of a strange behavior. Let's say you walk into a room and there's a fellow sitting at a desk. The room is empty. Doors closed, the windows are closed, and he's talking to himself. And it sounds like it's a monologue, but every now and then he breaks into what seems to be a conversation with an imaginary figure. So there are multiple people involved. So you say, well, what is this fellow suffering from? Is he mentally ill and having hallucinations? Or is he a writer trying to come up with a few lines of decent dialogue?
Yeah. Yeah, and then the characters sometimes come to you and you're like, I don't need to hear this. Why are you giving me this information? Yeah, mhm.
So I just thought it was kind of, and then the other part of it is perhaps he's not searching for dialogue. Maybe he's searching for the right word.
Fair.
Now he's already written down a word in his writing, but it just doesn't quite fit, and he's not sure of it. So he of course runs to his thesaurus to find that word, and a dozen synonyms he has to choose from. So of course he gets up and starts walking around, and he starts talking about each word because if it doesn't sound right, it's not going to read right.
Very true.
So eventually he strikes on the right word. It's the perfect word. And it's reminiscent of what Mark Twain once said. The difference between the right word and the almost right word is the difference between the lightning and the lightning bug, which
True.
is quite true. So those are the kind of things I wrote about. And it's interesting how writers, I think, for the most part, have these habits ingrained in them. Uh, they feel like it's part of them, and they don't want those habits violated, by the way.
No.
No, no interruptions, nothing rearranged. We'll do it as we always have,
Uh,
which I sort of enjoyed writing about because all of us are afflicted one way or the other with these things.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's the person that is the plotter, which yes,
Yeah,
I've tried plotting. I can try plotting anything every day, but it will always end up being pantser. I will
yeah.
always end up letting my characters direct the story.
Oh, yeah.
So it's one of those things where I think as a writer, once you find what works for you, bad habit or not, you're still gonna do it.
Oh, yeah. It's ingrained. It's
Hmm.
um, and of course, if you then successful, my goodness, then you know you have to stick to that habit because if you change it, uh, you may lose all of your magic.
It's like the athlete who has the will put the tacky thing out there, the jock strap that will never be washed because they won their best game with it, and they continue
Oh,
to win games with the same jock strap. So
oh,
yeah,
absolutely. Oh, and if by chance someone washes that jockstrap,
everything's out the door.
right, and he happens to lose the next race,
Yep.
oh,
Hmm. Yep. Everything is done, and yep. So you understand what I'm talking about. I know we're going to talk about your latest book, but I want to go back to the beginning of when you decided to write your book called Transplant. Because when I was doing research about you, I ran across your whole ethos of how that came about. Because to me, that was interesting because it started out not so much as you wanting to be a writer. It was starting out as a research project that blossomed into something else. So,
Absolutely.
I mean, how did that, you're working on this research project. Tell us a little bit about that. And then how did you decide, okay, this really makes a fascinating story. So let me make a fiction story, which was optioned, by the way. But go ahead.
At the time, I was doing research at UCLA, and we had this patient, lovely woman, who had this terrible anemia. She was making antibodies against her own red blood cells. So it was a desperate situation for her. And if you gave her a transfusion, why, those antibodies attacked the transfused red blood cells. So things were looking rather badly at the time. And we happened to come across a patient, a family, who had a most unique blood type. They were type O, no A or B, but most importantly, they had no Rh factors, and most of the antibodies are directed against Rh factors. So here we contacted this family, got some blood, which was type O, no A or B, no Rh factors, and we transfused that lady, and she did wonderfully well, wonderfully well. And we put her on certain drugs, immunosuppressive drugs, and we could maintain her until those drugs took effect. So this was back in the 80s when transplantation was just taking off, bone marrow and tissue transplantation. So it struck me that, gee, this family was a universal donor of blood. They give that blood to anybody. What if somebody was born without any of the tissue antigens that are required for transplantation? What if that person was a universal donor, that her or his kidneys or heart or whatever could go to anybody without fear of rejection?
Wow.
I mean, that person would be in real danger because everybody would be after her.
Hmm.
And the idea came to me, it'd be an interesting idea to have a young woman discovered to be the universal donor. And when word gets out, her life becomes very dangerous, very hectic, because there are people who want her organs. And that's the gist of the novel. Now, when I wrote it, I didn't think of a career in writing. I just didn't cross my mind. I thought, well, this is an interesting novel. It'll be published, and then I'll get back to doing my research and what teaching at UCLA. I didn't know it was going to go through 8 or 9 reprints, and I didn't know it was going to be optioned twice by a production company and by a studio. So once that happens, you become addicted. Suddenly you say, hey, this is kind of fun and I enjoy doing it. So all along my professional career, when I was a physician at UCLA, I always made time to write, although it was difficult, but I did it. Finally, towards the end of my medical career, I was able to write full time, and that's when I started writing about the Daughter of Sherlock Holmes. And it made a big difference because now I didn't have the phone ringing, I didn't have other responsibilities or obligations. So that worked in fine from a time sequence. It really worked in well.
What do you think is the fascination still with Sherlock Holmes? That we have so many series still, but Benedict Cumberbatch, and I mean, I'm going back years now, his whole Sherlock blew up. We have Watson now on CBS. We have Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock. What is the fascination with Sherlock Holmes still?
Well, I once wrote an article about that, believe it or not. What's so special about Sherlock? And what I decided, interestingly, was that Sherlock Holmes is an individual we want to be, but in some aspects we already are.
Okay.
Now, what combination are you talking about? Well, we all want to be a sleuth, famous. Everybody wants your opinion or your services. You're nationally known. You're fantastic. You can do anything you want with this talent. Um, That's the one side, the skilled detective who is just remarkable. But then there's the other side of Sherlock. Sherlock, he's a lonely guy. I mean, he has Watson as a friend, but eventually Watson marries and moves out. Now you would say, well, gee, Sherlock will seek other friends. No, he won't. He likes being alone. He doesn't want any friendship. He doesn't want any attachments to people because that might interfere with his wonderfully tuned brain. He's a messy fella. He's messy. You walk around his rooms at 221B Baker Street, the papers on the floor, notices tacked up on the wall. He can lay around on that sofa for days on end, either smoking his pipe or injecting himself with cocaine. And that's the other side of us. We want to lay around until something moves us, something stimulates us back into action. And for Holmes, it was crime. For us, well, maybe other things. So I thought Sherlock Holmes was really a combination of what we want to be and what we already are. It's interesting to me that Sherlock Holmes was written about over 100 years ago. Yet today, he is the most famous detective in the world. No one even comes close.
That's wild.
Yeah, if you think in terms of what character has been portrayed most in movies and on television, it's Sherlock Holmes. Nobody else comes even remotely close. Whether you talk about Basil Rathbone or Jeremy Brett or this new fellow who I don't think measures up as well as others do, um, the story goes on and on. And if you look on Amazon at the various Sherlock Holmes spin-offs, quite remarkable how many there are. I mean, it seems to go on and on and on. But fortunately, I found the niche, Sherlock's daughter, and it's worked out well for me.
And how did Sherlock's daughter come about if he was a loner? Because I don't know. I mean, I know, like I said, the movies and everything, but how do we come across Sherlock Holmes' daughter for those who are not the Sherlock aficionados?
Well, it dates back to one of the earliest Sherlock Holmes adventures called A Scandal in Bohemia. One night, there's a knock on the door at 221B Baker Street, and in walks the King of Bohemia. And he has a delicate problem at hand. He's now engaged to the daughter of the King of Scandinavia, and a June wedding is planned. But his former lover, the opera star Irene Adler, is furious that he's done this. And she has photographs of them together, which are very revealing. Very, very revealing. And you have to remember, this is back in the Victorian era.
Hmm.
So if those photographs ever released, the wedding would be called off. The king's reputation would be ruined. So he begs Irene Adler to give her the photographs. The officer vast amounts of money, which she refuses. She's an opera star. She doesn't need his money. Well, as a last resort, the King of Bohemia comes to see Sherlock. Obtain those photographs for me. I'll pay any price. Well, this is usually not the type of thing Sherlock likes. I mean, but he's intrigued and he says, yeah, I'll take it. I'll do it. But she outwits him every step of the way. Irene Adler outwits Sherlock Holmes. For general information, Sherlock Holmes was outwitted 4 times, 3 by men, 1 by women. The only woman ever to do so is Irene Adler. At the end of the scandal in Bohemia, uh, Irene Adler writes Sherlock and says, I still have the photographs. It's been a pleasure dueling with you, but I'm off to another world. So Sherlock, who admittedly admires her talent, he's not in love with her, he just admires her talent. Off she goes. Now, Irene Adler shortly after falls in love with a distinguished English attorney, Godfrey Norton, They marry, move to Paris, where they'll enjoy a life of ecstasy and romance. Ah, but Norton turns out to be not what he showed
Appears.
up front. He's a scoundrel. He's a womanizer. He's a gambler. He's rarely home. He only comes back to get money because she's still an opera star. But the worst part of it is he's a dullard. He's boring, boring. Now, here we have this woman who's remarkably bright, so bright she outwitted Sherlock Holmes, and she's stuck with a bore. I mean, it's intolerable.
Hmm.
Well, one night there's a knock at the door at 221 Baker Street. Watson has moved up by now. He's married. And Sherlock opens the door, and it's Irene Adler. And she gets right to the point. She tells Sherlock, my marriage is a disgrace. It's awful. He's dull. He's boring. I need intellectual stimulation. And you're the only man in the world who could provide it. Well, Sherlock welcomes her in, and they have a delightful evening, solving crimes, creating crimes, putting puzzles together. It's just great. Wonderful conversation, glass after glass of brandy, injecting themselves with cocaine, and they end up in bed together.
I was gonna say that was all foreplay. All
Yeah.
foreplay because the mental
Oh, well,
stimulation got them going
yeah,
and
bed together. The next morning, Sherlock wakes up and Irene is gone.
of
No
course.
note of farewell, no goodbye, gone. Well, he's delighted. He doesn't want any romantic entanglement. There's a murder in Belgravia he's involved with. Let her go, be gone. Fine, go. 8.5 months later, there's another knock on the door at 221 B Baker Street. And Sherlock opens the door. And standing before him is Irene Adler, who's very pregnant and very ill.
Hmm.
She's suffering from the toxemia of pregnancy. Her blood pressure is sky high. Her kidneys are failing. She'll be dead in a matter of weeks. And she comes to Sherlock for some sort of assistance. Well, Sherlock's a cold-hearted fellow. He's not going to become a father. He's not going to become associated with her. Forget that. But it's a puzzle. Sherlock loves puzzles that need solution. So he goes to see his friend Watson and tells him what the problem is and says, this is how we're going to solve it, Watson. When she goes into labor, she'll be admitted to one of London's better hospitals. Upon delivery, that child will immediately be put up for adoption, and you'll see to that. And the adoption papers will be sealed forever. Nobody will ever know she's my daughter. Well, Watson agrees. Sherlock then hustles over to Bohemia to see the king because Irene has given him these photographs. He gives them to the king and says, these cost me £5,000. I want you to pay me for them, which the king does. Holmes comes back to London, sets up a trust for the baby to be born so that there'll be financial security for her. And as far as Holmes is concerned, that's the end of the story. Irene Adler goes into labor and has a beautiful baby girl who she names Joanna. But Irene Adler gets to hold and kiss the baby only once before she dies.
Unfortunate.
And Irene Adler's daughter, which was fathered by Sherlock Holmes, is adopted by a well-to-do upper middle-class family.
And eventually finds out she is.
Yeah, eventually.
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice. So,
interesting story.
yeah. And that gave you the inspiration to say, if I'm going to mess with the Sherlock Holmes thing, I'm going to go this route with it.
Yeah, and I thought it would be a bit different because number one, time has now passed, and we're going from the Victorian to the Edwardian era. We're going from the period or era when wars were fought in Africa, India, Afghanistan. Now they're fought on the continent. We're going from the era of carriages to motor vehicles. Everything is changing. And she has to be part of those changes. It's who she is and what she is. But in my novels, She has this wonderful deductive brain. She shows it. Scotland Yard is aware of it. And Lestrade's son, who is now an inspector at Scotland Yard, comes to her for assistance. So all the old players come back into focus, including Miss Hudson, the woman who owns and rents out 221B Baker Street. So I was able to put them all back together and create a new generation. For example, um, Joanna eventually falls in love with Watson's son, who's also a pathologist, and they marry.
Okay.
Miss Hudson, the woman who owns the house and rents and leases it out to them, why her daughter now owns the house and leases it out. And when Joanna and the young Watson marry, they move into 221B Baker Street, which has plenty of room. So the old Watson is there as well. And that's how they form the investigative team.
Nice. And the new book is called Scandalous Affair, A
Right.
Scandalous Affair. Is there another book after this one or
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's swirling around in my head. Um, I'm almost to the point of starting it. Almost. It usually takes me oh, 5 or 6 months to get it done. That's pretty quick, but
yeah.
I can. And then it goes into the publisher and it revisions and this and whatever. But by 9 to 10 months, it's ready to go. So every year, year and a half, I'll come up with a new one. They say, well, you should do it every year. Every year. Look, I write at my pace, not yours.
And I think that's what people don't understand, that it's not that simple to, yes, I can write a book, great, but then you have to revise it. You have to get it, you have to polish it. There are so many different things to do as a writer, and I don't think readers actually think that, because some of them can devour a book in a day. And that's awesome and incredible, but it takes a lot longer to really write a story that's worth telling.
Well, a lot of people have the Hollywood image of a writer.
Hmm.
Just set the scene for you quickly. As a writer, middle-aged, handsome fellow sitting at a desk in a big study overlooking a lovely garden, and he is writing down the words as they come effortlessly to him. And his wife comes in to the library and says, lunch will be ready shortly. And he says, oh, Dad, just another moment, please. And he writes down, ah, there, it's done. It's finished. And the viewer, of course, says, gee, what a wonderful existence. What a wonderful way to live and to earn a handsome living. But of course, that's all nonsense. That's the Hollywood view of it.
Though I will say this, Hollywood did do a good take on writing in Wonder Boys with Michael
Yeah.
Douglas.
Oh, yeah.
Because yes, he has writer's block. He is overwriting. Everything that could go wrong goes wrong. So that one I would say Hollywood did a great job with.
Every now and then they do that. But that's usually not the view people want to see, particularly wannabe writers.
Right.
They they want to, at the end of the road, there's that pot of gold.
Hmm.
Uh, and they just don't realize that writing is tough. It's an arduous task, time consuming. And you better be ready for disappointments and rejections because they're there, whether you want to be or not. And when it comes to writing, I always remember what Ernest Hemingway said about writing. He said, there's nothing much to it. You just sit down by your typewriter and bleed.
Hmm. Hmm.
So the reality is it's a tough road. And I expect that's why everybody wants to write a novel, as I was once told. But I corrected that individual. I said, no, you don't want to write a novel. What you want is to have written a novel.
Yeah. I think that people, the one thing you stated that Hemingway said is the needing to bleed. And the thing is, when you write, if you truly want to tell a good story, I I kind of took this from an acting class I took. The gentleman he had done some commercial work and everything, and he told us in acting class, he said, you have to live in the moment. And I took that kind of not only as an acting, but as a writer. Because
Mhm.
if you are not really believing in what you're writing, if you're not feeling those emotions, it's not going to come, it'll be shallow on the paper. It's not going to translate to the emotional impact you really are seeking because you have to feel what your character's feeling. If you're just like, Tammy cried. Okay, well, that's not really being emotional. You have to allow your reader to get swept up in those emotions. For me, one, I think I have this one book I wrote, which I'm going to be rewriting it. But everybody that read it told me, I can't stand this guy. Of course, some people felt sympathetic for him and thought he needed somebody to take care of him. But they were just like, I can't stand this guy. He's the vilest man in the world. I don't know what I read. He's the vilest man in the world. And I'm just like, okay, I did my job. And my husband looked at me and was like, what do you mean? I'm like, I made them feel something.
Yeah.
They hated him. I don't care if they hated him. I made them feel something. And of course, somebody's like, oh, you can't redeem him. On my next book, I redeemed him and then some because everybody's like, oh, yes, Team Nigel. And I'm like, challenge accepted. Thank you. So, but you have to believe in what you are writing.
Yeah, you have to not simply tell it, you got to show it.
Hmm.
For example, if somebody is hurt by a memory, I mean, you can write down the memory was very painful, but on the other hand, he's talking about the memory, and you say, and as he spoke, his voice cracked.
Hmm.
You know, it hurt.
Hmm.
It took him a minute to compose himself. You know, it hurt. You got to show him. Um, it's not easy to do. It really is not easy to do. But if you want to be successful, you better learn how to do it.
Hmm. I mean, there's something I'm working on right now, and it's like, you still love me. And she's like, no, I don't. He goes, if you didn't love me, your eyes wouldn't be pooling. Because right there, you can sit there stoically and say it, but if your eyes are watering, the truth is there. And that's the thing. We have those micro movements of our body that betrays us. We can be stoic as anything, but our body will betray us.
Well, talking about eyes, I once read a line which just stuck with me. And the line went something along the order of eyes can touch someone far more than hands ever thought of doing. And it's
Hmm.
really quite remarkable.
Hmm.
Because it's true.
Hmm.
You can't hide the eyes. It's
Well, I mean, this is going to be a little weird, but I'm going to state this. It's like one of those things where I remember in high school, everybody's like, oh my gosh, look at that guy's butt. Look at that guy. And I'm thinking to myself, the only thing I want to look at on a guy is his eyes and his smile, because his eyes are going to tell me who he is.
oh yeah.
His body's not going to be that in 40 years, but his eyes, they're pretty much going to still be there. His emotions are there.
Well, as someone who I don't know wrote, the eyes are really the window to the soul.
Hmm.
And it is. The eyes, that's involuntary. You really don't control that.
No.
Yeah. Interesting.
So tell us a little bit about A Scandalous Affair. What is the premise of the story?
The premise of the story is there is a very high-ranking English official. He is Chancellor of the Exchequer, which in England is third in line of power back then. First is the king, then it's the prime minister. Next, Chancellor of the Exchequer controls the treasury, all the money, all the taxes, all the tariffs, what have you. And in addition, this chancellor, his name is Lord Ratcliffe, sits on the War Council, is doing World War One, and all of the major military operations which take place on the continent has to be approved by the War Council. So he's a very powerful, very influential man who has remarkable knowledge about things that most people don't. Unfortunately, he's being blackmailed.
Mm.
A person unknown has photographs which show his granddaughter in romantic encounters with a man other than the aristocrat to whom she's engaged. And this person demands more and more money for these photographs, each one being more salacious than the next. And of course, the demands will continue. And of course, he may break under pressure and reveal war plans or what have you. So it's very serious situation. So in the dark of night, he comes to see Joanna and the Watsons because somebody has to find out who the blackmailer is and get those photographs. And that's the gist of the novel.
And so, in ways, it's similar to what we discussed earlier, which is cool because that kind of goes full circle then. And
Yeah.
that's kind of neat.
Yeah. And for those of us who are a little older, back in I guess it was in the late 60s, there was a big scandal in England when Profumo, who was, I forget what he was, high-ranking secretary of one or the other, was involved in a scandal with a teenager, and he had to resign because of it. And there were questions about security leaks at the time as well. So when the scandal is big enough, it affects just about everybody.
What's interesting is when you think about that. So, yeah, I was born in the late 60s, so I know nothing about that. But I think what's interesting is scandals back then, even until the 80s, that could ruin somebody. I mean, Jessica Hahn, all those things ruined people. Nowadays, a scandal is not as detrimental, I think, as it was.
I think we've become more open and I dare say more coarse as a
Yes.
society. Um, I mean, little things show it. I was looking at the internet a few weeks ago, and someone asked the question, if someone holds the door for you, should you say thank you?
Yes.
I mean, well, I would think so. I mean, thank you very much. Well, but there was a question being asked. When I was growing up, I a question that somebody did you that favor or whatever, you thank them for it. So the world has changed, and it's always going to change, you
Oh
know.
yeah. I mean, I grew up because I grew up in Louisiana, New Orleans, and yes, it was yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sir, no sir. And I remember as a teenager, my mother said asked me something. I'm like, "What?" She goes, "What did you say?" I'm
And,
like, "Ma'am." And I mean, I still will find myself slipping into manners if someone is older than me. But manners, I think, are long gone. In fact, when I worked in insurance, I had somebody on the phone, this was back in the early 2000s, who got ticked off with me. She was younger than I, and I said the word ma'am to her. And she's like, don't down talk to me. And I'm just like, I wasn't. But it's funny because it has gotten flipped that sometimes if you use the word ma'am, it's derogatory now, which is
it's,
weird. But I mean, that's how, like you said, things have evolved and even words have evolved. And it's a matter of changing tide and it's hard to navigate sometimes, but you have to accept it. What was once an acceptable word now may not be an acceptable, or then is not now.
uh, I remember back a few years, if you misbehaved, if my brother or I misbehaved, all it took was a look from my father, just a look. You knew, don't cross that line. You're getting too close to it right now, and you backed off. Today, accountability is almost laughable. They make excuses, they find a reason why, rather than saying, look, behave in a human, decent fashion and life will be better for you. They just don't.
Well, I was reading something very interesting yesterday. It was talking about the movie Adolescence that's on Netflix. And I'm not trying to get controversial, but it was interesting because it talks about how the fact that kids nowadays are not so much raised by parents. They're raised by the internet. They're raised by
Oh,
an
yeah.
algorithm that is
Oh, yeah.
consistently giving them dopamine hits. So instead of wanting love, they want notoriety. They want to be seen. And yes, I go back to Andy Warhol saying everyone will be famous for 15 minutes. But the thing is, those algorithms, they're not real. They're controlled, they're manufactured. And it really distorts our views of way of thinking if we're always constantly on our phones looking at things. We're not really embracing life.
Well, that's why I don't have a smartphone. I will not have one. And I was at a gym where I work out periodically, and this very nice girl who's a bit younger than me said, "Don't you have a smartphone?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Why not?" And I said, "Because I don't want to be its prisoner." And she looked at me strangely. I said, "See that iPhone? You're its prisoner. You don't want to go anywhere without it. And if God forbid you lose it, you're going to go into a fit of depression. That's your connection to the world, to the friends, everything. That's your universe." And her response was, and I quote, "Well, you just don't understand." And I said, "Perhaps you're right." But what I really thought was, "Oh, I understand. I understand you're so connected to the internet. You're so connected to that way of communicating, to feeling and thinking, that to be without it, it's almost terrifying. It's almost terrifying. But that's your life, not mine." Yeah, the same thing happens with the writing. You say, "Oh, with AI, artificial intelligence, they're going to write." Good. Let me see the novel that AI writes.
Well, and I'm sure you've heard the scandal that came across this week recently that Meta was going to piracy sites. So people had pirated people's books. Fortunately, I was not one of them, but gone onto a piracy site and trained its AI through this piracy site so it could learn how to write books and communicate more. And this was
Yeah.
all Meta slash Facebook. So what AI is doing is just learning from us. And eventually, and that's the thing. It's like it's not that I'm against AI. I think AI has a place, but I think there has to be limits and restrictions because I'm a writer, I know that sometimes you can write fact even though it seems like fiction. And yeah, the possibility of war games, of it becoming self-aware. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I do see that it could become self-aware if we do not put those guardrails in.
Well, as I said earlier, the world is changing.
Hmm.
It's going to continue to change,
Hmm.
but I still think that talent matters.
Yes.
When we see it, we know it.
Yes.
Now, it may not be in writing, it may be in sports or this or that, but you know it when it's there. It sparkles and it gets your attention.
Well, I mean, even like the service that I use to air my podcast, there's a feature where I could actually have an AI co-host. I'm like, I don't want that.
No.
And somebody said, there's certain things that AI will not be able to do. And one of them was about waxing. Well, sure, it's not going to be able to do that, but it's not going to be able to give you a haircut for a long time either. But eventually, as it evolves, it'll be able to do those things.
Yeah, I think that one should never underestimate technology because today's magic will be tomorrow's routine.
Hmm.
It's going to happen. Um, Things that we never thought possible happen. And when it happens, we become so blasé. I was watching television last month, where it was. And Elon Musk sends this rocket up into space. And the booster comes back down and is caught on Earth by chopsticks. Did you see that?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, had this mechanism which these giants come together and they catch it. Usually, what happens is that booster is just discarded in the ocean.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't need it anymore. But he does it so he can reuse it. And he had a mechanism to catch it. And I was thinking, if I had suggested this 10 years ago, people would have looked at me as if I was insane.
Hmm.
Insane. So I have learned that again, today's technology is tomorrow's routine. It
Hmm.
just happens. It just happens. And you either conform or rebel, do whatever you want to do. But the point of the matter is it's there and it's not gonna go away.
No, no, the
But
genie's out of the bottle at this point.
but again, I am not that concerned, believe it or not, about AI writing a novel.
The ones that I've heard that they have written, they people have complained about.
No.
So, and I mean, even books on tape, there has been the talk that, there's AI narrated books. Well, I can imagine that that's not going to go necessarily smoothly, but in time, I'm sure it will. In time, there are going to be those cheaper ways to do things. Snow White is a prime example. They ended up using AI dwarfs. But
Uh, I, I tell you, Hollywood, whatever you say about them, they know how to adapt.
mhm,
COVID wiped out the movie theaters. Here come the streamers.
mhm,
I mean, it's like, well, we'll switch horses in the middle of the stream. It's quite remarkable. People are adaptable. Um, but I must admit, I miss the movies. I miss going to theaters. I like that. Um, and people say, well, you could watch it on Netflix or whatever. It's not the same.
no.
It's the same. You go to the movies, get a big bag of popcorn and a Pepsi or Coke or whatever, and sit back and just be transported into another world.
Mhm.
Whether it's Gandhi or The Godfather or whatever great movie that you really saw and liked and became involved in. I'm afraid that may be gone. I'm not sure we'll ever get that back. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope.
I haven't been to the theaters since before COVID. However, that being said, I've lost my husband and I've had some health issues, so going to the theater has not been an option. So yeah,
Yeah,
streaming has been something I have embraced more, but you know, it is what it is, and it isn't the same because you can stop in the middle of a movie at home and go, okay, I'm gonna go to the bathroom, I'm gonna go do
uh,
this, and then I'll come back, or I'm tired, I'll watch this later.
yeah,
It's not the attention span is not required as much as if you're at the theater where you are transported. I mean, I can
yeah,
still remember seeing Star Wars at the theater back in '77. And as a kid, that was just like the most amazing thing when that crawl started on the screen
yeah.
because, wow,
Oh,
okay, yeah.
yeah. When it's done right,
Hmm.
it just captivates.
Hmm.
Right now, I'm not sure certain Hollywood has the directors and producers and actors to produce that same feeling of wow, great. When's the last time somebody came up to you and said, "Have you seen? Did you watch?"
Oh, and that's there's a couple of drawbacks here. Number one, you constantly have them remaking stuff, so it's not new. Two, we have so many options. And it used to be you had that water cooler moment. And yes, people are talking about White Lotus. We'll give White Lotus that. But for the most part, you don't hear the big tent pole of, oh my gosh, did you see Friends? Oh my gosh, did you see this? Nobody is sitting there talking about things in mass anymore, except on a rare occasion. It's mostly, everybody's got their own little short story that they watch or show that they watch. It's not the mass. Oh my gosh, I couldn't, I had to tune in to make sure I watched it. Now it's like, oh, it's on demand. I'll watch it later. I'll binge it, you know?
Right. Every now and then, something comes on that's truly magic. It's rare, but it happens. And all of this happened not recently, but more recently than the things we're talking about, was Sopranos,
Yeah.
which just had that right chemistry. You had to watch it.
Hmm.
Um, so I think given the right impetus, the right materials, the right equipment, the right funding, it's probably still there, but you got to go out and get it. And today's world, going out and getting it are strange words, strange.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that all of us aren't a little tired of a lot of things going on, that it's just like, I just need to rest. I just need to stay in my lane, do what I do, and if it works out, great. If it doesn't, you know,
Let me tell you, I write usually every day from 9 to 1 or 2 or whatever. In those 4 or 5 hours, I'm in a different world. Don't bother me.
yeah.
Don't want to talk to you. Don't want to hear about your problems. I'm doing something else. Call me after 2, then we can talk about it.
Well, and I was not writing for a couple of days, and I did find myself when I know when I don't write for a while, my mood changes. So it's like I have to climb back into my story and start working on that and
Well,
start playing along
yeah,
with that.
yeah, I think you make a mistake if you stop the flow of the story.
Hmm.
You say, well, I'll get back to it. No, 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 don't get back. Do it now.
Hmm.
Not going to be very good. Write it now. Well, I'll only throw it away. Don't throw it away.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
Write it down and hold on to it. Because a month or two from now, you may say, I think I wrote something like that. So let me see about this. See, I think I wrote about that.
Mm-hmm.
Remarkable that can come back. So you learn. Sometimes the hard way, sometimes the easy way. But the reality is, you got to find your own zone. Where do I fit best? And for now, I fit best as a writer. Good for me.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would like to add?
No, I think we've covered a lot of territory here. I
Okay.
did want to talk about the habits of writers. I I've often wondered why writers write. Why do you write?
Why do I write? I've
Yeah.
I've been writing since, I mean, I used to draw a lot when I was a little kid, like make little I would take a little sheet of loose leaf paper and I would make little apartments. Granted, I never lived in an apartment at the time, but I would make little apartments. And then I would tell little stories. And after my parents split, I started putting myself into TV shows, even like Heart to Heart, where there was no kid. Suddenly they had a kid. I would put myself in there because it's like I wanted to have this story. I would let this my imagination go. And then by the time I hit high school, I really had started adding I started creating stories. They were even though I had these other stories in my head, I really started creating. And ever since then, I think I had my second job, I got myself a typewriter because I didn't want to write in longhand anymore. And so I started typing everything. And then, yeah, it just kept evolving and evolving. And my first book, it took me over 30 years to release. However, that being said, I never will release that 30-year book because my first book that came out, I ended up writing while my husband was in dialysis. The character came to me and was like, I got a great marketing idea for you. I'm like, really? Okay. So I started this rock star's journal. I started this guy who was just straight up a nasty man, and I would write it as a blog. And I had rehab centers follow me. And once that happened, I'm like, these people think this is real. So I'm just going to turn it into a book. And lo and behold, I had friends that I was doing this at Barnes and Noble. I had friends, they were going to be closing that location. And we had one more new writers' night. So I had something to push me to get that story out. And so I finished that story. And then when I went to my next book, there was a contest that I had to have a story written in a month. And so it was like, okay. And I took some stuff from the 30-year novel and moved it over there and made everything work. And I realized that when I write, if I don't write, like I was saying earlier, there's something in me that just gets kind of agitated. It's like, I need to get that creative energy out because if I don't, I don't feel good. So why do I write? It's because I'm passionate about it. And that's one thing a lot of my friends have always told me. They're like, when you talk about your writing, you light up, you become passionate about it. And so I think if we don't pursue our passion and we don't fulfill that, it starts, dare I say, our light, our soul just kind of starts shrinking. So that's why I write, because it's a passion of mine and I love telling a story. I am not the best writer in the world grammatically, but I can tell a story and I've been told that many a times.
Yeah. Well, that's what writers are, they're storytellers.
Hmm.
Storytellers. Well, I once read something. There was a quote from Oliver Wendell Holmes. as to why people write.
Okay.
And he said something which always struck me as spot on. He said they write because it gives them the intoxicating pleasure of penmanship. Oh, oh, it's something like that. Oh, yeah. And it's true. I mean, you write and you, oh, it's terrible. But when it's done, and particularly when it's published, hey, hey,
Oh yeah.
look at me, folks.
Yeah.
So people have different avenues they take. But as I said in this article, which we began our conversation on, writers are peculiar people in some regards. Um, and good. That makes us different. We're not happy-go-lucky, but we like what we do. And at the end of this road, we've got a product which we can hold up and say, here, this is what I did.
And also for me, it's that I made somebody have some joy or feel something,
Oh,
that I
yeah.
connected with them. And I think more than anything, I think that means the most to me is that I know somebody enjoyed something that I created.
Yeah. I think there's got to be joy to it somewhere along the road. Otherwise, you wouldn't do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I thank you, Leonard, for coming on the show.
Oh, it's been my pleasure, Dawn. I really enjoyed it. It's good to talk about things that relate to literature. I like that. I enjoy that.
Me too.
Um, a lot of people that talk about the books and the words, but there's so much more to it that I really enjoy. And I think we touched on a lot of it today, so it was very good. And thanks for the invitation. It was really a pleasure.
Thank you. It's always fun when I get to sit down with another writer and discuss writing. And it is something that I'm passionate about. I don't talk about it enough, I guess. And I kind of pulled most of my books off because I really am in the process of rewriting my books. There's only one still available. The rest, including my first one, is being retooled. And it's a process, and that's okay because something about it is it needs to be tweaked, it needs to be changed. And good or bad and different, I'm still going to make Nigel in Days the most despicable man, but I kind of pick up the pace, I've been told. So that's what I'm going to do. Just some tweaks here and there. And once all those books are back out, then I'll be promoting them. But really sitting down and writing is something that if I don't do it, like I said, it's just something that it's part of me. It's part of me creating. I love doing this and this fulfills me and I get to talk to great people and but writing is a different craft. And if you are a creative, you understand that. It's like the painter who has to paint. If you don't do it, and I should have mentioned this with Leonard because the fact is sometimes we will create something and then we get in our own way about it. We get in our own way, and this is the person that overpaints or overwrites or produces a song. It's that creative thing of perfectionism, that icky perfectionism where everything's got to be just right. And the one thing about when I release Days, and I have like 95 copies of the thing that is just badly edited and it's bad, but I had a time crunch. It wasn't perfection. And I thought to myself, it's his journal. It's not going to be perfect. If anything, it's going to be a hot mess express. But I got chastised because it wasn't perfect. Everything wasn't polished. So I learned, I lived and learned, and that's okay because I think it was a learning lesson for a new writer. I was so excited about having that book, and there's a picture of me holding that book. And so what he was talking about is when you finally see, and sometimes we call them babies, when you finally have that in your hand and you see the final product, it's one thing that's so absolutely amazing. I actually this past January, two of the books that I had, or three of the books that I had released, I did not put in paperback, and I put them in paperback for 2 weeks. Didn't advertise it just because I wanted a full set of what I had done, and I got it. But it's only for my personal use. It's not for anybody else's because I wanted to be able to look back and say, okay, here, this is what I've done. And I think whether it's music, whether it's art, if you have that creative drive, even if it's writing poetry, you have to find a way to get that creativity out. And I think that's part of the problem. We get stuck in fear and sadness, and we don't think that things are good enough, that, I could do this better. Sure, you could do it better, but what if it's good just as it is? You have to get out of your way. You have to get out of imposter syndrome, because that's a big thing, because you can see something and think, wow, if only I could have done that. How do you know you can't do that? How do you know? You have to put one foot in front of the other, do what you got to do, and be you, own you, and understand that you have the ability to create something from nothing. We all do. We all do. If the teacher told you you couldn't paint, why did she tell you that? I had a mother who told me I couldn't dance, but yet I was the girl at the club up on the speaker dancing my ass off. I didn't care. And then when I actually talked to a dancing teacher, because my mother would sit there and tell me I had no rhythm, I'm a bass player. Let's think about that one. And when I talked to the dance teacher, she just looked at me and said, "You have more rhythm than most people in this class." So I look at my mom, and it was her jealousy. And sometimes, like the art teacher who comes over and scribbles on the paper and tells you that's not right. So you trace it, and then she looks at you and goes, "That's not right." Of course, me with my wise self decided to look at her and say, "I just traced over your stuff." Yeah, that got me in trouble. But the fact of the matter is, sometimes people have an agenda. And so you have to do you. Your art may not be great. But then if you look at some people who have great art careers, some people don't find that art as art. They think it's ridiculous. So as the saying goes, one man's trash is another man's treasure. So create your treasure. Don't let somebody else get in your way. If somebody doesn't like it, oh well, you do you. And that's the most important thing. So now I'm going to get off my soapbox. Go check out his book. There'll be a link in the website to his website. And if you love Sherlock Holmes, definitely check it out, because he advanced the series. And that was one thing we didn't talk about either. And having that, when you start historically and you move time and you have to be accurate and you have to create that world, it's always amusing because you still have the same people, but now they have different things to deal with. Just kind of like our life, like we were talking about with AI. We have to get used to those things. Doesn't mean we have to like it, but you have to get used to it. So, on that note, I want to thank Rich Zai for doing the audio, Fast Susie for the opening and outro music, and you, of course, because whenever you're listening, it really does mean a lot to me. And, well, if you're listening morning, noon, or night, I appreciate you. And I'll catch you next time, guys. Bye.